he was brought up in a fantastic family of pros. And we were training at a gym in Leeds that was owned by 2 rugby players. Played high up, played for England. And they were taking the mickey, talking about wrestling and what it was and what it wasn't, and how they thought it was this and it was fake and blah, blah, blah. And Owen said, oh, right, okay, yeah. He said, do you wrestle? You guys, can you wrestle? And they said, no, we're rugby players, our game's real and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, okay. He said, well, listen, why at the end of the day today, why don't we clear some room in the gym, and we'll have a little pool round, have a little tug-about. So the 2 guys laughed and sort of said, yeah, okay. So sure enough, at the end of the day, Owen and I cleared some weights out of the way, got the mats ready. One of the guys came on the mats. Owen said, what are you doing? We said, well, we're having this pull-about you talk about. He said, no, I was talking about both of you coming on at the same time. Owen got both of them on the mat and made them cry like babies within minutes. They were crying and screaming, let me go, let me go. Owen just ripped them apart, absolutely ripped them apart, And they never said anything again after that. They had the utmost respect for Owen, And I did too. He was just the nicest guy you could meet, inside and outside the ring. Unassuming. I could talk to you for an hour about how nice Owen was. I genuinely loved the bloke. Great bloke.
I think when someone dies, nobody says a bad word about anybody, but I think it was absolutely genuine with Owen, wasn't it? I don't think there was anyone that said a bad word.
Yeah.
And I think that match with, one of your favourite matches, the match with Bath, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's on YouTube somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, well worth. So when did you see the influence of the American wrestling start seeping in on the British scene?
I can tell you almost exactly when it happened. I was there the night the business changed for me in England. We were working a WWE show in Birmingham. There was a few the English guys on, I think me, Dave Taylor, Finlay, and Rocco, and a few of the other guys. And there was Brian Dixon and Oric came along, and I like both those fellas. I'm not going to say anything bad about them because I genuinely do like them both. And I've had some of the best times in the business and my life with Oric Williams, fantastic bloke. But the business changed that night. The 2 of them were there and they saw the spectacle of it all. The fact that the houses were packed and the multi-million-dollar lighting rigs and just a massive presentation of the whole show. And I think they and perhaps us to a certain degree were impressed by that. And shortly after that, everything changed. Everything sort of went that way, sort of American style, and lights and smoke machines and false entrances and stages and stuff, and that was about the time everything changed. And if I had to put a date on that, it was probably sort of early 90s,
yeah,
late 90s, around about then. Yeah, but I was there, I saw the look in their eyes, and I knew things were going to change, and they did.
Brian Dixon, like you say, I've got nothing to say bad against Brian. I did a lot of work for Brian, and he was always absolutely spot on with me. And if you look at the guys that have started with Brian, that have come over for Brian, I think half the WWE roster at some point have been over and worked for Brian.
Yeah.
Who are some of the Americans that Brian has had over who you've worked with that has gone on to success?
Oh, gosh, he's had so many over, haven't they? I've been dropped on my head so many times, Steve. My memory is shocking. You can name me practically anybody that's been through WWE ranks that have been here, and I've wrestled them,
Yeah.
The amount of guys, like I said earlier, that used to come to England just purely to learn the business.
Yeah.
I mean, even in those days, New Japan was sending guys over to learn the business here, and then they would go back, the likes of Liger, and Tiger Mask, people like that. They would learn the business here and go back to Japan, absolutely brilliant pros, and that's how they made the name, and that's exactly what the American guys did too, and that's still happening to a degree, in the ring now. Guys are coming over from the States to learn the business here. They're touring around England, doing the shows here, and going back home with a lot of experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's still the place to learn, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it's this bizarre thing really, because all the young guys that are breaking in the business now that I speak to, they all want to be like the Americans. And want to imitate the Americans.
Who are they going to learn from now? That's the problem.
But the really bizarre flip side to that coin? Every guy I've ever wrestled in the world, all over the world, want to learn the British style.
Yeah.
That is absolutely
true. Who's going to teach them?
Put my hand on my heart and say, everybody I've worked with has admired the British style and said that British wrestling is the best. So why are we imitating other people? And the other proof of that point, there's two countries in the world that have never copied the American style, Japan and Mexico, and their business is still booming today.
An excellent point.
Proof to put in, isn't it?
Yeah,
two
absolutely.
countries that have never done American style wrestling. Both countries are still booming.
Absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of Japan, this is about when we first met, literally. I remember the first time we met, we was in the changing room in Hull Beach, and I was petrified of you. But you did.
Full circle, hasn't it? I was that petrified one.
Exactly, because this is exactly what you say. The respect was there. You know, it was kind of a. I was saying to Marty, I would sit there in the changing rooms, and there'd be a couple of guys my age, and we'd sit there and we'd be talking away. And you know, admittedly, I would never admit this to the guys at your point in your career at that time, but we'd be talking about WWF probably at the time. And then the car would pull up with you and Marty and Skull. Maybe Dave Taylor or somebody at the time, and we'd shut up. Yeah. That's it. We wouldn't speak, and we'd let you guys speak. I mean, and you know, I'd travel in the car with you and Drew and things, and I'd keep my gob shut, I'd keep my ears open, and I don't know if you remember this, but I'd always ask you to watch my match, and I'd say, can you ever watch my match tonight, and you know, let me know what you think. And I don't think that happens anymore. You know, I don't think people ask that anymore. And I'm going off on a complete tangent here, but I like to put this across because when was the last time anybody asked you to do that?
Well, it's strange you asked me that, Steve, because if you'd have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have agreed with you totally and said you're absolutely spot on. But right now, it's changing again in the business. And, you know, and when I go back now, because I still wrestle a fair bit, you know, and when I go to shows now and do wrestling shows, it's really bizarre because young kids are coming into the change room, shaking my hand and calling me sir, you know, and it's so nice to meet you, and I've seen you so much on the World of Sport replays and television, and it's almost going back full circle again, where the young guys that are coming in the business have a lot of respect for the older guys. You know, it's almost gone right round full circle, and it's really, really nice to see. And young kids are actually saying to me exactly the same now as you said to me then, back then days. Will you watch my match for me? Will you tell me how I can improve? And that's really, really nice to see. And the strange thing is, when you were talking earlier about how you had so much respect for the old guys, I also had respect for you. I wasn't going to tell you, but I also had respect for you at that time because I knew you had that respect, you know?
Yeah.
And in a way, I gave you respect for that because I knew what you were doing, you know? And you reminded me a bit of myself. I could see myself in you, you know? You really wanted to be in this business, and you were prepared to go to any length to, you know, to get what you wanted to get. And fair play to you. You know, how can I not have respect for you for doing that? You did exactly the same as I did. You know? You
was always very nice to me, in fairness, when the others wasn't, so that's why I always liked you.
Well, listen, I'm nice to people who are nice to me, you know, and I like to think what goes around comes around. The problem with that is some people take kindness for softness, right? And I'm not soft. I'm not soft, you know. I have a very long fuse, and people can grate on me and whine on me, but guess what? When I snap, run for your life, you know, because I have a very long fuse, but when I snap, you don't want to be around me.
So, round about when we first met, buddy, you had literally just got back from Japan, Michinoku Pro, I believe.
Yeah.
And you actually lent me a tape of this. There's a chap called Dick Togo who's recently just retired, I read. Yeah. And he does a horrendous landing on you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this, but I remember you telling me you was all alone in the changing room after this, pissing blood with blood coming out your mouth. Do you remember this?
I will never, ever forget that. This is the only time in my life I honestly thought I was going to die from an injury in the ring. What had happened during the match, we both had our heads bust open, and he couldn't see anything, and it all went horribly wrong, and he basically just came down full weight and just crushed the life out of me, and I just couldn't breathe. I just lay there, and for that moment, people talk about your life flashing in front of your eyes. It really did. You know, at that moment, I'm led on the canvas thinking, I'm thousands of miles away from home. It's the end of the tour. I'm not going to make it. You know, and it was the last night of the tour, and we were right up in the north of Japan, Morioka, somewhere like that. And everybody else had left the arena, and I was still led outside on the car park, laid on the concrete, trying to get my breath. 2 or 3 hours after the match, I literally couldn't breathe, and I didn't eat or drink anything. I thought any moment I'm going to need an operation. This is really serious. And I had 3 days left in Tokyo on my own before I got my flight back. And all I did, literally, And fans will probably be amazed when they hear stuff like this, but all I did was went back to my hotel room. I didn't eat anything. I didn't drink anything for 3 days. I just woke up, took a pill, went back to sleep, took a pill, went back to sleep, and that's all I did for 3 days. I just didn't eat or drink anything. I thought any moment this is going to be it. And eventually I made it back on the plane. But I thought something really badly serious had gone wrong, like maybe a burst spleen or something. It was really that painful. I couldn't breathe. And I'm good with pain, Steve. You know, I can remember the likes of Finlay and Scholes saying, no pain, no pain, no pain, you know, and I'm good at that. You know, I can take pain. But this pain was different, and I think you know when something's different, you know. I never ever did find out what it was, and eventually I just got better on my own. But like a true pro, when I got back to the UK, I got in my car and drove straight to Brighton on my own, and I wrestled that night. And I'd just flown 16 hours, I think, back from Japan, and I was still in agony. I got in my car and drove down to Brighton so as not to let anybody down, and wrestled that night and drove home again afterwards.
Oh, God. Yeah. Obviously, yeah. It's the things you do, isn't it? It's the things you do.
That's what we did. Yeah. That's what we were taught to do, you know?
Yeah. It's certainly instilled in you, isn't it? But I remember you showing me that, and it was, and if I don't know if that's on YouTube or anything, but absolutely horrendous. He does kind of like, I think they call it a senton, but he literally just lands his entire weight, and he's a big guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, yeah. And
he lands his entire weight straight off the top. If anyone could track that down to have a look, it certainly is horrendous.
Yeah.
And it certainly sounded a very painful 3 days for you.
If you get to see that, you know, anybody listening, if you actually get to see that match, take a look what happens afterwards. I'm just led there. And take a look into my eyes. You can see it in my eyes, you know. I'm fucked, and I know I am, you know. And, horrible situation to be in. But, you know, you and I have both been in positions like that. Not as bad as that, maybe, but many times, you know. I can remember my wife once at the time went out and filled my car up with petrol. I was so badly injured I couldn't go and fill my own car up. She went and filled my car up, and she literally carried me to the car. I had 2 broken ribs, 2 broken ribs, 2 ruptured discs, and a dislocated thumb. She lifted me into the car, and I drove down to Southampton on my own in absolute agony. Couldn't get in or out the car. That's why she put the petrol in to get me there. And when I got the other end, the guys lifted me out the car, helped me get changed, and I went in the ring that night and wrestled because I didn't want to let the fans down, and I didn't want to let myself down. And that's not a blag. That's the actual truth. You know, in those days, I didn't want to let anybody down.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how you were. You just never. You were not allowed a day off for injuries. You know, unless you were in hospital, actually in hospital, being operated on. You had to be at the show, and you had to turn up, and you had to wrestle. And I can still do that today, Steve. You know, if I've got a really bad injury, like I have at the moment, I had an MRI scan 3 months ago, and I was in the machine for an hour. They did lower back, middle back, you know, thoracic area, and neck. And when I came out, the woman just said, "I'm amazed you walked in here unaided." She said, "Did you actually walk in on your own?" I said, "Yeah, of course. Why?" She said, "My God," she said, "you've got so many like broken bones where they've healed in the wrong places." And she said, "I could show you so many bones where they've just been broken and not mended right." And she said, "You've got a crumbling disc in the base of your spine, one in your neck, just below the base of your neck. And she said, you've got a separated shoulder." And she went through this whole list of injuries. And she said, "I'm absolutely amazed you can walk on your own." I said, "I still wrestle." And the girl nearly fell off the chair, you know. She was just absolutely amazed. And she said, "Your pain threshold must be unbelievable." And I said, "Well, it's not that I'm some sort of superhero. I'm no more superhuman than anybody else. It's just that that's how I've always been taught. I don't know anything else. You know, I don't know how to take a day off injured, because no matter how injured I am or what injuries I'm carrying, when I get to the ring and I hear my ring music, something in me changes, you know, and I can be in absolute pain and hardly walk, but as soon as that ring music goes on, I know I'm getting paid to do a job, and I also know the fans are paying to watch me. They don't care if I'm injured. They don't want to see me have a shit match just because I'm injured. They've paid good money. They want to see Danny Boy Collins flying about. You know, I can't go in there and say, "I'm sorry if it's not very good tonight, ladies and gentlemen, my back's aching." They're not fucking interested. They've paid their money. They want to watch you fly about and do your match. And that is what defines a professional wrestler. You know, we are professional. And when we hear that ring music, something changes in us. Something changes.